Mark Carney has secured his first tariff reversal as Prime Minister with what he calls a landmark trade deal with China.
There is much to protect in this relationship and much on which to build and much to be gained. So leveraging our strengths and focusing on areas of alignment, Canada and China can create greater stability, security, and prosperity for both our nations. And to that end, President Xi and I are announcing that Canada and China are forging a new strategic partnership.
The deal will lower Canada's 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles to just over 6%, and will now allow up to 49,000 EVs into Canada, Chinese EVs. In return, Ottawa expects Beijing to drop canola seed tariffs, a tax that has devastated canola farmers in Canada, from 84% to 15% by March. This brings Canada and China back to measures that were in place a couple of years ago in 2023 and marks a significant de-escalation in years of ongoing tension between the two countries. Dominic Barton is Canada's former ambassador to China. Nice to see you this morning.
Great to see you, Rosie. Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you. I am very interested to get your perspective on this trip, the first one by a Canadian Prime Minister in almost a decade. How important do you think this reset is between Canada and China?
I think it's extremely important. It sounds like it's been a very good trip, both in terms of having a reset, but also quite pragmatic as well, and also setting in kind of the mechanisms to talk about other issues, opportunities and challenges. So I think this is really important. I think it fits very much with the Prime Minister's push that we've got to double our trade outside of the U.S. Over the next 10 years. And that's $300 billion. So I think this is really important.
Canada's decision to implement the tariff, the 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, was made, as you know, with the Biden administration. The fact that Canada is now moving out of line with U.S. trade policy, especially when it comes to China, are you concerned about a rupture there between Canada and the U.S. in the face of China, or is this what's to be expected in these days?
I think it's the way the world is, if you will, right? I think the Prime Minister had a more eloquent way of saying it, but it's we're just in a very volatile place. And I think it's important that Canada, while recognizing the importance and the need that we have to continue and hopefully increase trade with the U.S., we have to diversify and have the resilience. And I think, you can't count on it, but President Trump's, comments on that were, at least in the short term, positive, right, on that side. But I think it's a matter of we have to follow our interests. Obviously, it's a very difficult, tricky world to navigate. The Greenland situation, is brewing in the background. Yeah. But resilience for us, I think, is very important. And, again, China has been part of the India, the Middle East. We just have to have deeper relationships with these countries and regions.
In your role as ambassador, you, in case people forgot, you were instrumental to the release of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Knowing what China is capable of, knowing how to manage that, what are your concerns about those parts of the relationship? It's one thing to have a trade and economic relationship. It's another to talk about, human beings and the way that China can react. Do you have concerns around that now?
Well, I think we all do, right, in terms of the using trade as a weapon, so to speak, people and so forth. But I think what's most important is there's actually a relationship. There's actually a dialogue. There are mechanisms. 10 different mechanisms, working groups. It sounds very bureaucratic, but those are very important, have been established. And that includes on the security side. And that, when I was there, that wasn't there. That had broken down. All of our mechanisms had stopped except for ones on climate. And that makes it difficult to deal with issues. So I think it's a pragmatic, clear-eyed approach. And I feel, especially with the mechanisms, particularly on the security side, that's very important. And I think I think the Prime Minister emphasized that, and I know that had been discussed a lot. So That's how I feel.
When I interviewed the Prime Minister last month, he said that there have to be guardrails for China, when it comes to AI, when it comes to critical minerals, defense. How do you keep those guardrails in place as you try to evolve the relationship? And do you think that the Chinese understand that there are limits to that relationship?
I do. I think it's very important about being upfront and clear. I think, no surprises, if you will. And I think the Prime Minister and President Xi had, it sounds to me like a very intimate discussion in the October meeting in South Korea, where it was really more about the relationship and that there are guardrails and that there are areas, lots of areas to cooperate on, but there are areas where there is going to be no cooperation, and we compete, if you will. But I think that was made very clear. I think the other thing we should just keep in mind, right, is we're a member of the Five Eyes. All the leaders of the Five Eyes in the 12-month period will have been in Beijing. New Zealand started last year. The Prime Minister in Australia has been a couple of times. Keir Starmer's going in a couple of weeks. President Trump's going. So, our Five Eyes, the sort of the security side of it is engaging. We've been kind of the outlier. And again, for good reason, there's been anger and all, but I think it's time we've got to have a relationship to be able to deal with issues. There are opportunities, but also deal with some of the challenges. So I was quite excited to see those mechanisms. That might seem like a boring thing to say, but I focused on that. Those 10 mechanisms being set up or revitalized is really important. And I think there's going to be a lot of work for our civil servants in getting those ready and up and running and kind of the dialogue going back and forth.
Well, overnight, we also learned that Canada wants to look at joint ventures and investments with Chinese companies within the next 3 years, with the idea, Dominic Barton, to build a Canadian electric vehicle with Chinese knowledge. Is that plausible? And do you think that from a security perspective, that's a good idea to have Canada creating an EV industry with China inside Canada?
Yeah, I think as long as, one, it's going to create jobs for Canadians and have a supply chain in Canada, that I think it's something we need to look at. China is by far the leader in EVs. I think they produced 16 million EVs last year. And they have a number of companies that are BYD, Launch, that actually build entire, car systems in other countries. So Launch, for example, has built the Vietnamese automobile industry, and it started with a Chinese supply chain, but it has to move to a 100% Vietnamese supply chain over a period of time. BYD in Brazil is building. So there are ways to be able to make it work. I think on the security side, I defer to our security colleagues on how to do it. I think that's doable. There are a lot of Chinese EVs here in the UK, in Europe. One of those companies I mentioned is actually providing the electric vehicle manufacturing for one of the largest European automobile players, right? So I think as long as, again, it's creating jobs and supply chains within the country, I think that's something to be explored. And my read of it was this is a opportunity to be looked at and to see it. And I think there were some very good discussions that happened in Beijing with some of those players I've mentioned.
I'll just end on this. Obviously, part of this is in response to Donald Trump, right? This is about Canada trying to diversify trading partners right around the world. Do you think that this would have happened anyway, even without the threats from Donald Trump and the way he's trying to upend the sort of world trade system?
I do, because I think, again, for Canada, we're a small trading nation. We need to have relationships with some of the largest economies in the world, and that includes China, 18% of the GDP. It includes India. I'm very excited that we've reconnected, if you will, with India and the Middle East, and I could go on. So I think we would have gone this way anyhow. It's important to do it, but I think the current conditions, if I could call it that, have accelerated it. It's incredible what's happening, and so I think we need that diversification and resilience. And the good thing is it's going to create jobs and opportunities, and we have a lot to, I think, gain from it. But again, with the guardrails that are very much, I think, part of the strategic agreement.
Dominic Barton, nice to see you. Thank you for making the time. Appreciate it, sir.
Great to see you.
Canada's new trade deal with China will allow a set amount of Chinese EVs to enter the Canadian market. That move has drawn some criticism from Ontario Premier Doug Ford over concerns for the auto sector. For more on how the city at the heart of Canada's auto sector is responding, I'm joined by the Mayor of Windsor, Drew Dilkens. Nice to see you, Mayor.
Good morning, Rosemary.
So we're still learning about this new deal. The Prime Minister was asked about it again this morning and pointed out that there is now a cap on how many vehicles are going to come into Canada. But give me your first impression on the idea of this being allowed.
Well, I for us here, it just seems to be the start of the potential of an erosion of the auto industry in Canada. And so we're very alert to that, very alive to that. We, of course, have been since Donald Trump has started threatening our country as well. At the same time, we understand and appreciate that we need to have some form of relationship with our second largest trading partner, that being China. And so there has to be a way through this that doesn't destabilize the auto industry in Canada, that allows the Prime Minister to thread the needle with Donald Trump as we get into CUSMA renegotiations. And ultimately, I really believe there has to be a guardrail that if we're going to allow the sale of 45,000 cars, EV cars from China every year, it has to come with some job guarantee at some point.
Okay. Well, to that end, we did also hear over the past day or so that is kind of the goal that Canada would have in mind, creating a bit of an industry with Chinese vehicles in Canada. If that's the long-term goal, because the auto sector is under threat from the United States, would that be more interesting for you and for people in Windsor?
Listen, if the jobs accompany the amount of vehicles that are coming in, then we have a different conversation. And they have to be job related, not just setting up a footprint in Canada, because we don't want some factory that's a dark factory with, robots displacing all of the people that work in the factory. In the city of Windsor, our largest employer is Stellantis. They make the Pacifica and the minivan here for the North America and frankly, global sales. And it has about 4,500, 6,000 employees who work there. The spinoff that comes from that, Rosemary, with having an OEM manufacturer in your city is about 9 to 1. And so it puts bread on a lot of tables for people, not just in my city and my region, but all throughout Ontario and frankly, all across the United States and Canada, because the supply chains are so integrated. You're talking about 30,000 parts that go into the average vehicle. And so there's a lot of hands that touch that, a lot of movement, and a lot of people involved. And again, it creates a lot of jobs on our continent.
We also understand that when that phone call happened on Friday with Dominic LeBlanc and premiers, that there was a conversation around support for the auto sector coming in the weeks ahead. What is missing right now in your mind that is needed to help people?
Well, underlying and underpinning all of the last year has been uncertainty. And I think the automotive companies are in an uncertain environment. Certainly the workers are nervous because they don't know what's coming next. They see the President of the United States, who came to Detroit last week and, again, reiterated he doesn't care about CUSMA. He doesn't need Canadian vehicles. We know that that's not true. We know that it's a bit of a speaking point, but we know the supply chains are so tightly integrated. And I was watching, besides the President, I was really watching Bill Ford and Mr. Farley, the CEO of Ford, for their reaction when he said that, because they also know that it's a different landscape than what the President is presenting. But we know that he's creating a level of uncertainty where people aren't putting money, the investors aren't coming. Everyone's just taking a wait and see approach. And perhaps, our strategy is we think Donald Trump is going to lose the midterms later on this year, and we're putting all our eggs in that basket, hoping that happens and we get back to a normal environment. But that's a pretty big risk. And so I think what people here want is what everyone wants across the continent, is some level of certainty, both for investment, but about job security as well.
Well, I'll end on that then, maybe, Mayor. I think, part of what the Prime Minister is doing, both today in Doha and, of course, in China, is to try and find, as he said, more reliable trading partners than the United States, which is one way to tackle this issue. But I wonder if that also gives you any cause for concern about how the United States might react. They haven't reacted badly so far, but in case that becomes an issue going forward.
Well, listen, we're on the verge of a renegotiation of CUSMA this year. And so it's important that we get this right, that we make sure that we put we put all of our efforts to getting this right on all fronts. And of course, there's going to be some give and take and some tension on the wire. At the end of the day, no one wants to lose anything and no one wants to walk away with half a loaf. But we have to make sure that we are not disadvantaging or putting ourselves in a disadvantaged position vis-a-vis making deals with China that automatically set fireworks off in the United States. No matter which way we cut this, even if we have a plan, Rosemary, to diversify our trade and find partners on the East Coast or the West Coast, put everything on a ship and send it overseas, the United States will always be our largest trading partner simply because of proximity. And we have to find a way to work with them while we go through this thorny term of a president.
Mayor Dilkens, it had been a while since we chatted. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for always making the time for us. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Okay, have a good Sunday. For canola farmers, the reduction of Chinese tariffs could not come soon enough. That tariff came into effect in August, hitting farmers right at the start of harvest season for maximum impact. The March 1st timeline to reduce tariffs means Canadian farmers will have some level of certainty now for planting season and planning ahead. Rob Stone is a Saskatchewan canola farmer we've spoken to before, and he joins me live this morning. Rob, we could probably call you our favorite canola farmer at this point because we've talked to you a number of times through all of this. Now we're talking to you with a little bit of good news. So tell me, what was your reaction when you heard the news?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, good morning. It was a bit of surprise for me, to be honest. We're so used to having disappointment in this file that when you start seeing some progress, I was ecstatic to see some good outcomes happening. And I think the last time we talked, I'd asked for people to fix it. Well, we're starting to work on fixing it. So that's good news.
So not eliminated entirely, down to 15%, I guess, by March. What does that mean for you practically?
I think it's all about trajectory for me. We can see a thawing of relations. We can see the fact that we're returning to a more business attitude when it comes to our exports, including canola on our farm. And that's all good news. When it comes to the markets and all of those things, the markets, I think we're responding favorably to the presence in China all of last week. And I think without coming home with some good news last week, we would have probably seen some fairly significant problems in the canola futures markets last week. So that's what I'm seeing out of this so far.
Okay, well, remind people who haven't seen you here before what the impact has been on your farm and the pressure that this added to your work and how you survive out there.
Well, certainly, when you have your largest export customer for canola, basically put prohibitive tariffs on, it affects the export business. It affects our ability to move canola off the farm. It affects our ability to pay bills, cash flow, all of those things that the crop has certainly provided to our farms. So when we had those sorts of trade issues developing, your mind goes to all of these different catastrophic places of how's our farm going to survive long term, and what's that going to mean for agriculture on our farm in Saskatchewan and in Canada. So, a lot of uncertainty is really what that created for us, and with the expectation that we would start seeing some of these discussions happening now.
So as we talked about, I think the last time, this happened when Canada put the EV tariffs in place. Now Canada has lifted them and is going to allow 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into the country. And there was some upset about that. Obviously, the Premier of Ontario wasn't happy. There were a lot of auto workers and representatives not happy. When you hear that, what do you think? Because obviously there is a bit of a trade-off here.
Yeah, I think trade is all about trade-offs, isn't it? And sure. I guess I look at this from my perspective that this is good for Canada. Canada is an export-based economy. Agriculture in general contributes largely to the GDP. Even canola, there's various different numbers that roll it up to a $47 billion a year industry when you count all the jobs and everything else. So it's a big deal. I have to advocate on behalf of ourselves and be glad that the government realizes that Canadian agriculture is a big deal and Canadian exports are really important to our economy. So there's always going to be discussions about all of the rest of the things. Yeah. I'm concerned with what has been going on in our industry, and concerned with how we've had some follow-up with these political decisions in the past, and a resumption of normal rules-based trade is what's most important in our export economy.
When you heard this news, did you cheer? Did you pour another coffee? Did you pour a cocktail? What did you do?
I was at the crop production show in Saskatoon, so just recent industry meetings and everything else. So yeah, I woke up to the news and exactly that. Just scrolled through the phone for a while and started reading some positive articles and some positive reports on this, and just really quite happy with the collaborative approach that our premier and the federal government and all of the farmers and commissions were able to report on these resolving these issues. So it was just, it was kind of, that a little bit of a victory read when you're usually doom scrolling on the phone, it seems like these days.
Yes. Well, you were due for some good news, Rob. Thank you for always making time for me. I appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Anytime.